Gaza's health ministry blames Israel's ban on fuel and medical supplies for the deaths of at least 34 hospital patients.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak replaces Home Secretary Suella Braverman with James Cleverly, and former Premier David Cameron makes a surprise return as Foreign Secretary. The Icelandic town of Grindavik braces for a volcanic eruption after evacuated residents were allowed back to collect their belongings.
Five weeks after Israel imposed a total blockade, the Gaza Health Ministry says the territory's largest hospital can no longer operate. It doesn't have the fuel, electricity or medical supplies it needs to treat the influx of people injured in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Health Ministry says 7 premature babies and 27 intensive care patients have died at Al-Shifa Hospital in the past 3 days.
كامل مخزون السولار لدى البلديات وفي حالة توقف الآبار وعدم توريد السولار بشكل عاجل فإننا أمام مأساة الموت عطشا لجميع السكان والبالغ عددهم في قطاع غزة إجمالا 2,300,000 نسمة.
Israel's military is urging civilians still in northern Gaza to move south as its offensive against Hamas militants and commanders continues. It set a 7-hour deadline for them to evacuate. Shells and bullets are making it difficult to leave without getting caught in the crossfire. The Palestine Red Crescent Society says it's given up on trying to move patients from Khan Yunis to the Al-Quds hospital. Meanwhile, the United Nations is holding a day of mourning for the 101 colleagues killed in Gaza since October the 7th. They paused for a minute's silence. Hamas says more than 11,000 Palestinians have been killed. Israel says its death toll stands at 1,200.
A political earthquake in the UK as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacks his Home Secretary Suella Braverman and brings former Prime Minister David Cameron back as Foreign Secretary. Sunak fired the divisive hardliner after a series of controversies. The latest was an unsanctioned newspaper article in which she suggested police had been more lenient on pro-Palestinian demonstrators than on right-wing counter-protesters. As part of a wider reshuffle, Braverman will be replaced by James Cleverly, who leaves his job as Foreign Secretary. Braverman's departure is likely to anger the right wing within the Conservative Party and reignite a simmering faction battle. No longer a member of Parliament, Cameron will have to be appointed to the House of Lords in order to take up his position. He's considered a moderate who campaigned against Brexit during the 2016 referendum when he was Prime Minister.
Arranca una semana decisiva aquí en el Congreso de los Diputados para que España logre finalmente tener un gobierno después de 4 meses de las elecciones y tras el fracaso de la investidura del ganador, el popular Alberto Núñez Feijóo. El Partido Socialista de Pedro Sánchez acude aquí con la mayoría absoluta garantizada tras lograr un pacto con los partidos independentistas catalanes, como condición previa una polémica ley de amnistía para los encausados en el proceso que el Partido Socialista y sus socios registrarán en las próximas horas en el Congreso. Los diputados podrán finalmente conocer la letra pequeña de la ley que permitirá el regreso de Carles Puigdemont a España sin ser juzgado y que ha desatado una ola de protestas en las calles. Se espera que a mitad de la semana se celebre el pleno de investidura que reelegirá a Pedro Sánchez como presidente del Gobierno, un pleno rodeado de grandes medidas de seguridad ante posibles nuevas protestas. 1.500 policías blindarán el Parlamento para evitar altercados. En Madrid, Jaime Velázquez, Euronews.
Ukraine appears to be intensifying attacks against Russian military, logistics and other high-profile assets in area areas in occupied Ukraine and in Russia. The Ukrainian main military intelligence directorate reported that Ukrainian partisans attacked Russian military headquarters in occupied Melitopol in the region of Zaporizhia on the 11th of November, killing at least 3 Russian Federal Security Service and Rosgvardia officers. A day earlier, the Military Intelligence Directorate said an attack by Ukrainian surface drones sank 2 Russian high-speed landing crafts off the western coast of occupied Crimea. On the 8th of November, Ukrainian partisans attacked a Moscow-installed proxy official in the Russia-occupied so-called Luhansk People Republic. Ukraine recently also struck a Russian military base in occupied Skadovsk, this is the region of Kherson, and Black Sea Fleet assets in Crimea. The Institute for the Study of War says Ukrainian forces have conducted a strike campaign specifically targeting occupied Crimea since summer 2023.
Ukrainian troops are being put through their paces at a French military base before being sent to the front line. The soldiers are there for an intensive 4-week training course aimed at getting them ready for a second winter, defending their country from the Russian invasion.
Ils ont pris les appuis. En avant, allez. Allez, on va jusqu'à l'ennemi.
France is on course to train 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers this year as part of an EU military assistance mission that launched a year ago this week.
Le rôle de la France dans ce cadre de ces formations, c'est justement entraîner à l'utilisation de l'armement ou des matériels qui sont cédés, mais pas uniquement, c'est de partager aussi notre doctrine occidentale.
With a frozen front line in the war, Ukraine is looking to develop its tactics and maneuvering schemes in order to bust through Russian defences.
Le point clé pour nous, c'est surtout d'enseigner à la troupe partenaire la manière de manœuvrer, de se mettre en place, d'aborder l'objectif afin d'éviter les tirs fratricides. Ça, c'est vraiment le point clé, surtout sur un terrain complexe comme ici, avec un réseau de tranchées qui part dans plusieurs directions. Donc, là, c'était plutôt bien réussi ce matin.
Meanwhile, President Zelensky has warned Ukrainians to ready themselves for a potential Russian assault on the nation's energy infrastructure. Last year, persistent attacks on the nation's power grid resulted in hundreds of thousands being deprived of heating or electricity during the coldest month of the year.
Poland's President Andrzej Duda tells the nation he's given Mateusz Morawiecki of his own right-wing Law and Justice Party the mission to form the government. But there's a hung parliament, with no individual party winning a majority of seats. And as Parliament met for the first time, more liberal parties that had been in opposition before October's general election announced they'd formed a majority coalition.
Jesteśmy gotowi za chwilę parafować tekst umowy koalicyjnej, który będzie dla nas zbiorem drogowskazów i rekomendacji.
One dotyczą i przedsiębiorców, i pracowników. Dotyczą i edukacji, i ochrony zdrowia. Dotyczą wsi, rolnictwa i wielkich metropolii. Dotyczą praw kobiet, dotyczą pomyślności rodziny.
The coalition pledges a return to more liberal policies, protecting values such as individual freedoms, a separation of government and church, but above all restoring the rule of law.
Musimy zacząć od odbudowy naszych relacji z instytucjami Unii Europejskiej, rozumianej jako dojście do momentu uruchomienia funduszy unijnych, które dzisiaj są dla Polski zablokowane, bo to oczywiście ma związek z zasadami praworządności, z porządkiem prawa w Polsce, bo wiadomo, że Komisja Europejska chciała widzieć zmiany w prawie dotyczące niezawisłości polskich sędziów, polskich sądów.
However, Razem, which is part of the coalition, decided not to sign the agreement, although it declares its full support for the government emerging from the opposition factions.
Niestety w trakcie tych negocjacji programowych nie udało nam się uzyskać gwarancji finansowania dla tak sztandarowych programów dla nas, jak kwestie budowy mieszkań na wynajem, jak kwestia ochrony zdrowia, czy chociażby prawa pracownicze, czy skrócenie tygodnia pracy.
The Law and Justice Party will more likely not be able to form a majority in the new parliament. However, due to the procedural reasons, Poland will have to wait a few more weeks for the transfer of power to the more liberal coalition. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Warsaw.
From midnight to early afternoon on Monday, more than 590 earthquakes were recorded in Iceland. The country is preparing for a major volcanic eruption which could occur, quote, within hours or days. During the weekend, the Icelandic Road Authority closed all roads in and out of the harbour town of Grindavik and evacuated its population.
No oczywiście, że to nie jest wspaniała sytuacja, ale no powiem tak, że jestem maksymalnie spokojny, po prostu taka sytuacja jest, że nie wiem co będzie dalej i to jest chyba najgorzej.
W zeszłym roku kupiliśmy dom. Odkładaliśmy, sprzedaliśmy mieszkanie w Polsce. Chcieliśmy zacząć życie nowe tutaj. Wyszło jak wyszło, ale nie mamy informacji, mamy wysoki kredyt. Nie wiemy teraz, czy banki nas jakoś wspomogą. I chcielibyśmy też dostać informacje z ubezpieczalni.
On Monday, residents were allowed back for 5 minutes to collect essential belongings. Experts from the South Iceland Volcanology and Natural Hazards Group suspect that magma is already seeping underneath the town and fear it will be destroyed by the volcanic eruption.
A celebratory light show graced the newest towers of Barcelona's Sagrada Familia Basilica on Sunday, a decade away from completion. The final two of the 4 towers of the Evangelists, 135 metres high and dedicated to Matthew and John, were finished in September. The 2 other dedicated to Luke and Mark were completed last year. The final tower, designed by famous Catalan architect Antoni Gaudi, will be finished in 2026, moving closer to completion 141 years after construction started.